Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad you're here today. And we have a wonderful story called The Ark and the Temple. And it's a continuation of last week when we built that beautiful, amazing tent and tabernacle to take care of the 10 best ways. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. In order to build the temple, however, we need some building materials. And so my hope is you could get your Play-Doh or modeling clay. We have modeling clay here. You could even use slime. And you know what we need? We need some trees, some cedar trees that perhaps you could make while I'm sharing this story. We need some trees, and we also need some stone because the temple was also made out of stone and wood. So we had a little bit of everything for the temple and all the parts within it. So maybe you could make us some trees and some stone, and maybe you could even send me a picture of your tree and your stone. I would love that. Have your mom or dad send me what your stone or your tree looks like. Okay? So let's begin. I'm going to put my modeling clay away because we're going to have a picture right here. So I'm going to move my camera down and I'm going to begin the story. All right. So the people of God came to the promised land. Let's pretend this is the promised land. And when David became king, he collected all the people from the north and the south, and he put them all into one group. He called it the City of David. And David and the people of God began to live in Jerusalem. But you know, something was missing. What was missing from this city? I'll tell you, it was the Ark and the 10 best ways, which encapsulated who God was all about. So guess what? David and his people went to go get the Ark. Here's the Ark and the 10 best ways. And once that was with them, they danced and sang. They were so happy. But then they decided, something else is missing. What about building some kind of structure for around the Ark? They decided that that was a wonderful thing to do. And although David wasn't allowed to build the house for God, Solomon, his son, was going to build the temple. So they got all the people together. And they needed to bring cedar trees, great big cedar trees, much like the ones you're building. They needed cedar trees for the wood. And you know what else they needed? They cut stones out of the mountains. There were big mountains. And they cut stones out of the mountains for the temple. So they needed cedar wood and they needed stones. And they worked day and night and day and night. And the temple began to grow and grow. And it became finally a great big place for all to worship God. This was the beautiful place with a great room and smaller rooms for people to worship God. Inside the temple, inside this beautiful temple, you can see all the different entrances, were the same things that we built when we made our tabernacle and the tent. They had the Ark, as we mentioned before, which was carried in by the priests, right? It had the 10 best ways. And then there was also the menorah. Remember this from last week? The menorah with the candle lights, the 7 candles. Yes, and there was also the incense that would be burned to make everything smell really good. And there was also the bread. There was bread for people to take and eat and celebrate. And our altar And there was also the area, if you recall, where the priests could wash up and get ready. So they had all the similar things that we had, much like we did last week. So you had the good sense and the smell and the lights. And on the first day that this was all brought together, the priests carried the ark inside and brought everything inside the beautiful temple. And it was a very, very special celebration. On the day everything was ready, the king came before all the people and prayed. Here's what he prayed. He opened up the scroll and prayed a very special prayer. O Lord, God of Israel, there is no God like thee, in heaven above, on earth beneath, keeping covenant and showing steadfast love to thy servants who walk before thee with all their heart. But will God indeed dwell on the earth? Behold, heaven and the highest heaven cannot contain thee. How much less this house which I have built? Yet have regard to the prayer of thy servant and to his supplication. Well, this was a very special prayer that they kept close at hand. He asked God to make this temple the place for people to come and to pray and to find justice. Solomon the king ruled well and was very, very wise. Some said he was wiser than anyone in the world. His father had been famous for his songs and war, but Solomon was famous for his wise sayings and the temple. After being king for 40 years, Solomon died and was buried in the city of David, where his father was buried and Solomon's son was made king. Let's move the ark for just a moment and the temple. That was a great story about where God is. And this story really begins the moment where people started to move to a place thinking, God is here in this place, in this temple, and this is where we should worship God. Slowly and surely, the people of God really thought about, is God in the temple? Is God with me? Is God all around us? And the people really struggled with this, thought about this a lot. They slowly and surely came to see God in the temple as a sacred place to pray, as well as in their hearts. And that's the beautiful part of the story, the turning part of this story, is that God is in the temple, much like God is in our church, and God is also in our hearts. I can't wait to see your pictures, the models of the trees and the stones. I hope you had fun building that. And I hope this week ahead, you have God in your heart, wherever you go. Peace. Take care and see you soon.